Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. We're in the greenhouse this morning. It's not a bad morning outside, but it's a little cool, a little damp. So I thought we'd get started at getting some of our house plants cleaned up. They kind of get neglected sometimes through the summer. Now, a number of them go out into potscapings, things like that, but in general, I tend to ignore the house plants a little bit in the summer. They get watered, they get fertilized, but that's about it. They don't get much other care and attention sometimes, because the outside garden is getting all the attention. So we're gonna have a look at a few common, very popular houseplants these days. All are related. They're all part of the aroid family, which is a huge family of plants, both tropical and hardy. There are aroids really everywhere around the world. Some of our biggest houseplant families and genuses that people collect are in the aroid family. You could think about peace lilies, Dieffenbachias, what we have, pothos. What's that one? Yeah, philodendrons is the biggest one. Syngoniums, the butterfly plants. ZZ plants, like so many plants that we grow as houseplants are in the aroid family. They all have similar traits. They all have some different traits, but one thing that many of the aroids that we grow as houseplants, one thing that they share is the fact that most of them are actually vining plants or shrubby plants that will send up vining stems. So we're going to look at what to do with some of those, how to propagate them, and an interesting trait that they have that is shared by a number of plants, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I just grabbed 3 plants out of the stockpile. An epipremnum or a pothos. This is Epipremnum pinnatum albo. It's got, well, ignore the hard water stains. I'm just looking to see if I have a cloth here, but I don't think I do. We have very hard water, so as we water things, it stains the leaves. The leaves, that could be cleaned up. One good item to use is cheap baby wipes. Really inexpensive ones will help clean up the leaves really, really well. Never smear them with milk or mayonnaise or things like that. All that stuff will dry on the leaves and help and prevent transpiration and the proper exchange of air and gases and water and all that stuff. So even a dry cloth will do a pretty good job. When in the house, you know, we water overhead here in the greenhouse, so water splashed everywhere. Indoors, you can direct the water into the individual pots more, so you wouldn't run into this hard water staining that we have. It's nice when you get new growth. Looks great compared to the leaves that have been here a while. Looks crappy. But anyway, the epipremnum is like a pothos. Actually is pothos. It's what pothos' proper name is. And as you can see, they are a long, crazy vine. Now, I mean, what do you do with these things? Most people just continue to wrap them around the hangers, let them trail. We had 2 in the apartment. We let them trail to the ground. Then we take them, loop them back up on themselves, let them trail to the ground, and just keep doing that. And we had huge, long vines, probably 20 feet long. And if you can keep them looking healthy like that, so be it. I've seen people start tacking them up around their living rooms and have the vines trailing around the living rooms. I really think one great way to grow a lot of these vining epipremnums and philodendrons and things like that is just up a moss pole or a bamboo pole or a bark slab if you can still find them. Something that lets them grow vertically as opposed to trailing. And that does an interesting thing. If you let a plant like this epipremnum here, for example, if you let it always trail, or even if it runs prostrate on the ground, the leaves will always be small. You'll get the variegation and things like that, but it'll always stay about the same size. If you train them to grow up a pole and grow vertically, this is what happens. All of a sudden, like a Monstera or your Swiss cheese plants, they start to get fenestrations and the leaves get bigger. And this only happens when you allow them to climb. Syngoniums or the butterfly plants will always have that arrowhead-shaped leaf unless you allow them to climb, and then they will become a three-lobed leaf as the plants mature. We see this in outdoor plants, and you'll see it in English ivy. English ivy does exactly the same thing. It'll trail on the ground or in a hanging basket. The leaves will always be about the same size. But once it starts to climb a tree, the leaves will change and English ivy will take on a mature form and then flower. It'll never ever do that if it's just creeping along the ground. So the aroids and the philodendrons and things like that, very similar, but you can also create spectacular specimens if you grow them up. So you can do that with these guys, you can do that with these, you can even do it with the philodendrons. I'm just going to grab this philodendron over here really quickly. Just reach over. So this is a philodendron white wizard. It's been living in its 2.5-inch pot for a couple of years, but you can see its strong upright growth habit. So I want to encourage that. I want this to get big, colorful. We're not getting any fenestrations yet, but we want to encourage that. Look at how even the stems are even stronger from here as you get down to the lower parts. So we're going to rejuvenate this plant a little bit. We're going to take some cuttings and we're going to get the lower part back into a nice bushy thick plant. We might even repot it, maybe. So the neat thing about aroids is that it's very obvious to see where new roots come from. Because they are vining plants mostly, new roots just adventitiously grow. Now they'll even grow in the air and grow long enough until that root finds a place to grow. In fact, if you just want to divert attention for a second, Laura, I'm going to grab one and just show the example. Okay, we're back. So, here is a neat variegated Monstera adansonii. Bought this as a rooted cutting, was fine growing. As it started to grow, the roots came off the stem. This root here happened to find a pot next to it, and look at what it's done. So it's actually started growing from that air root, relying much less on this piece of stem. So we could actually fix this plant. It's getting big and beautiful. We're going to grow it and stake it, but we could actually take this whole top piece all the way to here as a cutting. there we go. There's a big cutting all ready for us to start growing right away. This will not even hesitate to just keep on growing because it's already got this great start right here. What'll happen to the base? There's a few things you can do with the base. At this point for this one, I'm just going to keep it growing the way it is. What'll happen is it'll grow a new shoot from the tip here. Right at the base of this leaf is the node. It'll grow a new shoot from there. It will likely even send out a couple of new shoots from the nodes that are further back on the stem. And remember, I mean, we've talked about the nodes before. A very important spot. It's where a leaf comes out of. It's where a root comes out of. It would also be where a flower comes out of on a stem. It's the node. It's a very important spot. But there's all dormant growth points there. So this Epipremnum, or this Monstera adansonii variegated, we're going to have a nice cutting growing on it. We'll keep that as our specimen. This piece will become our stock plant, and we'll take more cuttings later. We could, if we wanted to right now, take each of these bits here, where there's a leaf and a stem bit and a node and a root, and actually root those as well. I'll show you on the other one. I don't want to disturb this plant too much. They're worth a few bucks, so, you know, we want to grow some more babies. We're going to do the same with the philodendron. And if you look at the philodendron here, you're going to see that we have some really wonderful shoots here. Lots of new root growth. Right here, here. Good sturdy stems, nice leaves. So we're going to take that as a cutting. So we're going to go back to just below, the node of this leaf, which is down here. We're going to cut it off. Well, I'm going to cut it off close to the stem here, so I'm not leaving a stump. Where this leaf was, there's a node. We're going to get a new shoot from there. So that's great. A couple of months, we'll come back and revisit this, maybe take another cutting. Now what we've got is a very good size piece that we can keep together as a cutting. We don't need to make it any smaller. What I will do is I will take a bit of this stem piece and just cut off that useless piece of stem. So I've got roots right at the base and another little group of roots here and a nice little cluster of leaves. This is going to be a beautiful plant in no time. Now, what do we grow them in? Well, everybody has their own mixes. Aroids, being jungle plants, being climbers, they're not quite epiphytic, but they will certainly climb trees and things. Roots will sometimes stay exposed. So in general, that will tell us that we want a very open, sort of airy mix. So most of my stock plants, I just grow them in our regular soilless mix, which is made, it's a high porosity soilless mix. So it's 30% perlite, 70% peat. If you want a more open mix, you can also mix some very fine orchid bark. Now this is a mix already. This has got a bit of charcoal, a bit of perlite in it, a bit of fine orchid bark. You can use these. So you see it's a very fine fir bark, perlite. Probably not heavy enough to use on its own, but you could mix that in with a soilless mix and just add to the openness of your soilless mix. So that's about half and half. You get a good free draining mix that never clumps to itself. It's always open. You can't do much with it as far as like make a ball of it and hold it together. So that would be a great open mix to use for many of these house plants. I think I find, you know, there's so many soilless or potting soils and stuff on the market these days. So many. And they all have lots of stuff in them, which is great. You know, people have put a lot of thought into it, but I always find that when I pick the bags up of potting soil, they're so heavy and dense. And that might be fine for a big ficus or, you know, maybe a big Dieffenbachia, things like that, that want that heavier soil. But these guys, I think, do much better with a lighter soil. So we go with the soilless mix, the Pro Mix or the Berger mix. Mix in a bit of bark, makes a great growing mix for them. Nice and open, airy. A lot of people, a lot of new growers, a lot of people growing all indoors are striving to keep things a bit cleaner, I think. And a lot of growers, you'll find, especially to root things, are using a really good quality sphagnum peat moss. Orchid growers are using it a lot, but again, you're also seeing it with people growing rare philodendrons and things like that. If it works for you, great. It's a wonderful growing media. I mean, it lets lots of air through the mix. It retains moisture really well. I find in most cases I go all one or the other. If I have a plant or two in my collection that I'm growing just in the sphagnum moss, I find I overwater them more than if my other plants, so I don't tend to keep them in the moss. But it's a great clean material to grow in, and especially root cuttings in, if you're growing indoors. You can fertilize it the same way, everything, and it does exactly what you want it to do and give lots of air into the mix. It may look crazy expensive. This 40-liter bag was like $39.99. But if you ever filled this with water and expanded it, you'd have a huge, like half a wheelbarrow full. So it actually is really compressed in these bags, so you get a lot for the money. Don't think that that is a small bag necessarily. I've thrown a little bit in, just a little handful. A tiny bit that you probably wouldn't even notice that I took out of the bag. And look at it already, picked up with water. Sphagnum moss expands extremely well. It holds water really, really well, but allows air to get through. Interestingly enough, peat moss, what's right there is this moss ground up very finely. That's what peat moss is. It's sphagnum moss that is decomposed in the bogs and is chopped up and ground up. So it's a very fine sphagnum moss. But, as you'll see, you can take this sphagnum moss and you can just take your cutting here and just wrap the sphagnum around it, like so, and into a pot, and it's done. Very, very simple. Now, because we have cut this from its main moisture source, we're going to want to put this in a big clear Ziploc bag or under a humidity tent for a while. Maybe even put it on some bottom heat until those few roots that were on there really get moving. And this will root very, very quickly. And already it looks great, right? It's very simple to take that. And then from the plant, like I said, we'll get more roots or more shoots will come from that cut area, then we can take more cuttings later on. Now, we can do this exactly the same. This Syngonium or butterfly plant, as I said, they want to be vines as well. And you can see this one, this is Batik, wonderful leaf pattern, has grown us a long vine here. Well, for us, this is prime for taking some cuttings. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back onto that shoot, and we're going to take that shoot as a cutting. So we're just going to cut it off there. We've got roots like crazy already happening here. I think I'll just get rid of that one leaf. Roots like crazy happening here. So we're going to get a good start at a new plant just by taking that as a cutting. Again, with the sphagnum, we can pack the sphagnum around it. May not have quite enough. Pack the sphagnum around it. Make sure it's moist when you use it. Get it wrapped around there, and then it can go into whatever pot you want. You can just drop it into that. Get those roots tucked in. And there we go. There's another great little cutting done of Batik. Now, what we can do with these, if you're really looking to multiply these things a lot, we could take something like this Epipremnum, and as you can see, as we go down the stem, everywhere where there's a leaf and a node, we have a root coming out. So, if you want to make a one cutting plant, which this was one rooted cutting when I got it, so it's growing these long vines, but if you want to make a garden center size or a florist size basket of a plant that's nice and full, you're going to do another method here. So we're going to take this tip cutting and leave it aside. That we're going to do something else with later. But you can actually now take this entire stem. We're going to clean off that bit of stump because that's useless. Oop, need a sharper knife. Scissors. Now, at the next node down, we're going to cut it about a ½ an inch above the node. And we're going to keep it lined up properly. Then this one, we've got our root here and our stem. Going to cut it again about a ½ an inch above the node below. And then we're going to take this one, we're going to cut it down. It's a long one, so a little bit longer, but you can see we've got roots, we've got a leaf, and if you can see it right in here, we've got a very tiny new stem growing. So we're going to take that, get rid of some of that excess stem here. Take the next one, the next one, whoops, the next one. Now, all these have leaves on them, which is great, because what we can do with that, get a bit more moss in here soaking. If you want a big full plant, you can take each piece. Each piece has a leaf, a node, a root, and hiding in the stem, a new shoot. So we can take them all, put them together at about the same height, put that whole cluster together, and then we're taking about 5 or 6 cuttings, we can do that. Actually, I'm going to do it a little bit different way. If I get a pot there. How do I have no pots here? That's interesting. Oh, here we go. We'll take our soil, our potting mix. You can take each one of these, stick them in so that the node is at the surface or slightly below. Push them all down. Get them all together. And as soon as each one of those roots and grows a new shoot, you're going to have a very full plant. That's how tropical plant growers get things like pothos and stuff to the market very quickly. English ivies, etc. Any of these vining plants. It's never just one plant in there. There's always 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 cuttings into the pot. And then as soon as they've all rooted, bam, you've got 4, 6, 8, 10 shoots there. If you're a specialty grower and you've got a really rare plant, you can do these individually and sell them as grow them on as an individual rooted cutting for a plant sale or something. Same thing. You could just wrap it in sphagnum. Into the pot. Warmth and humidity, and before long you will have a new shoot growing out of that vine, and you'll have a new epipremnum ready to go or trade or sell or whatever you want to do.
Jeff?
Yep.
Jane would like to know what your thoughts are on using coconut coir in the open mix or in place of sphagnum moss.
Well, coconut coir is really a popular product on the market right now. If you can manage it, it sucks water up like the sphagnum. Personally, if I buy anything in coconut coir, I transplant it right away. And not to say anything bad about the coir, but the way I water and look after stuff here in the greenhouse, the coconut coir gets too wet and does not drain fast enough for the way I grow. So for me, if I have a plant in it, it gets repotted right away. There's a lot of growers, I think, locally, if you're here in the Durham region, I think Vandermeer's, they're using a lot of coconut coir in their tropical plants that they grow, like their Hoyas and things like that. For them, it's doing really well. But like I say, they're doing, hundreds of pots of all the same growing material. I think whatever you use, if it works for you, great. But don't mix up a lot of different growing mixes within your general collection unless there's something needs a specific mix. Pick your mix, pick the combination of products that you like, that works for you, that works with the way you water, that works with your situation, and just go from there. Here in the greenhouse, we use, again, our straight professional soilless mix. It's 70% peat, 30% perlite. It has some lime in there to balance the pH. It has a wetting agent in there to help the peat moss grab moisture initially. And that's all it is. There's no nutrients in it. We add the nutrients ourselves, and we can grow everything in this. We can grow succulents in this. We can grow tropicals in this. We can grow pelargoniums, hanging baskets, tomato plants, everything in the same mix. Because we know how it behaves, and we can watch our watering and things depending on the mix that we use. So If you like the core, if you want to experiment with it, go right ahead. But I think, you know, find a mix that works for you and be consistent with it is your best bet. So we're going to go to another section of this epipremnum, and I want to show you something. So we've taken a bunch of cuttings off that stem that was fully in leaf and everything. But now we've got this long stretch of leafless stem. So what do we do with it? Well, for the look of the plant, we're going to cut it off just above a node that has a leaf on it, so the plant looks good. But let's just get this, plunk that in the water there, give it some moisture. Can you do something with this? Absolutely. On really rare philodendrons and tropicals, you might see the term wet stick. W-E-T stick, wet stick. What is a wet stick? A wet stick is simply this: a cutting that has the node, the stem, the root, just hasn't got a leaf yet or a new stem on it. So what you can do with these are not garbage. Just like we took our cuttings with the leaves on them, you can do exactly the same thing. Make sure you keep them upright and facing the same direction. That's important. Don't ever want to stick them upside down. You take your shoot, your shoot, your shoot, and another one. So what you've got is you've got the node, the root, and hiding in that node, and in fact you can actually see it. I'm going to come right up close. That little bud there is a new stem. So you can encourage these wet sticks to grow, and often what you'll do is just take them and even lay them sideways on sphagnum, just like that. Have the root going into the sphagnum, put them in a nice, warm, humid environment, keep them moist, and fairly quickly you'll have a new shoot growing from that stick. There's enough food in that stem piece, and there's a bit of a root growing there, that you can get them growing. So you can just take every one of these things and just lay them side by side in sphagnum and encourage new growth from those wet sticks. So we could do it there. Again, we could do it from the Syngonium. Again, I cut it back to here. I might encourage this part to grow, or if I want to keep the plant bushy, I'll just cut it back to there, and I'll treat this like a big long wet stick, cut it up into pieces. You can see growth coming already on them, so they're good and healthy. They will grow new plants in time. A little slower than a cutting, but if you want to increase your collection, if you want to have plants to trade or sell, great way to increase your plant collection very quickly. I think Laura has a question here. I think she's going to have me answer, but I just want to do one more thing. When we have a plant like this, and we want to get it looking good and lots of fenestrations and things like that, when we pot it up, we then stake it up. Each leaf that grows, if it's staked, will get bigger than the one before it, and more divided and more fenestrations. So this would be a great way. You can take this plant, pot it up right here, pot it, keep it trained up the stick. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. When it gets to the top of the stick, you take the top off as a cutting and start again. And then you can have a 3 or 4 foot tall plant with big, fully mature leaves. And it's a beautiful way to grow them. So keep that in mind. You have a question, Laura. I see it coming. Laura just found me an ivy geranium. So what's the question?
Paula would like you to give a little reminder for the best way to store geraniums and geranium cuttings for the winter. Hence the geranium.
Okay, so there are a few ways you can do it.
I couldn't find a bigger one.
This is fine. This is perfect. For us, what I would do with this plant right now is I would come in here and I would take a bunch of cuttings off this. And I'll do it, I'm just going to do one because I don't want to waste the cuttings. I'm going to do them later. But I would take a cutting just like we've been talking about. Now, on a pelargonium, again, you've got the same setup. Most plants are very similar that way. You've got a stem. Everywhere where a leaf attaches to the stem, you've got a node. At that node, roots will grow, new shoots will grow, and flowers will grow. Flower bud right there. Now, if we want to take cuttings from these, we've got lots of green stem here, so we can take a pretty substantial cutting. When we take it off the plant, we cut just above a node. So pretend this is still attached, because you don't want a little stump of dead stem that won't do anything. You want the new branch to come out of that node. Then that leaves us with this. So being an ivy and being that this is all nice and green, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it just below this node. Okay? So now at the base of our cutting, we have our node, which we know is going to give us roots. Then we're going to go up, we have another node here. That's going to give us roots. Get a good strong cutting. We're going to take that leaf off. That gives us another node. That's great. Then what we're going to do is, because we don't want this unrooted cutting to try to produce flowers, we're going to go and we're going to cut that flower off. So then we've got 3 nodes, 2 nodes above here. We're going to take our soilless mix. That's nice and moist already, not too wet. Take our soilless mix there. Find ourselves a dibbler. We're going to dibble a hole in the center of our soilless mix. We're going to put our cutting in 3 nodes deep. We're going to firm the soil around the cutting. We're going to water it. We're going to put that somewhere warm with some decent humidity and allow the cutting to root. Now, with pelargoniums, they're not a humid-loving plant, so you might only keep it humid for a few days. Keep an eye on it. If you see these leaves getting mildew or anything, reduce the humidity by opening the Ziploc bag or lifting the lid on the humidity tray, whatever. Through this time of the year, they'll benefit from a little bit of bottom heat. This keeps the soil a bit warm, generally finishes, helps root cuttings. On this plant, I would go back and I would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 cuttings off this plant, and then have the plant in a nice compact size, easy to fit on the windowsill, and I'd grow this plant for the winter on the windowsill, taking cuttings all the time. Every few weeks when you get a shoot that's big enough for a cutting, take another one. Once your cuttings are growing and you want to make them into a bushy plant, take a cutting. That one plant that you save over could fill all your hanging baskets next spring. That's how we do it. That's how we keep our things going. Let them bloom on the windowsill if you want. Who cares? You got a good sunny windowsill, great. Now, what a lot of people will do with pelargoniums is they'll do a method of sort of drying the plant out. They are almost desert plants. They come from South Africa. They're used to long periods of drought. They're somewhat succulent. So what a lot of people can do, and if you have the right conditions, hey, great, is take this plant out of the pot, shake all the soil off, and then hang the plants in paper bags upside down in like a cold cellar for the winter. The little shoots will get withered and wrinkly and crappy, but there's usually enough oomph left in the main stems for the plant. When you repot it, trim it back, there'll be enough left in them to send up new shoots and grow the plant. And that way you're not looking after the plant the whole winter. But you do need the right spot. A warm basement next to your furnace? No. You need a sort of a cold cellar that's cool, dark, dry but not too dry. And if you've got a spot like that, if you have an old cold cellar in your house, it might be just perfect. Try them that way, but have some cuttings rooting just in case those main plants don't come back. Do we have any more questions today, Laura?
No, that's it for your question.
All right. Well, as the weather's getting colder, if you got a crappy day outside and you don't feel like gardening outside, get into your house plants. They'll be happy to see you. We'll wrap it up for today. We've probably gone over our time, but it's always great, you know, when this houseplant craze, when rare stuff comes up, and you want to increase your collection or have plants to share or sell. It's a great little job to propagate them, get some cuttings going, have a safety plant. My goodness, we've lost so many plants over the years when we didn't have a safety rooted cuttings kicking around, that it's always a good idea to have more than one somewhere, or have a friend that has the plant too. So get out there, propagate your house plants, clean them up, and we'll leave it there, and we'll see you next week on Let's Get Growing Facebook Live.